Okay, this is gonna be the uh final episode of story time. This was my 1987 Camaro. At the time before I bought this thing, I did not street drive this car. This was the one car I did not build to drive on the street. Of course, it was a street car when I got it, but I got it out of a junkyard, which was setting kind of parallel next to a junkyard, which was in the same property, and a bunch of other cars were around it, like a Honda Civic or, you know, cars that had been crashed or something. It was in a tow yard, like a wrecker, and it was like a wrecker shop, some like salvage towing, when cars get in a wreck, where your car goes. And then right next to it was a junkyard, and then I found this up under some trees. Of course, it didn't. It factory paint, which is faded from the sun over the years, but serial number and everything. It was a 1987 Z28 Camaro, and I thought it had a 350. Well, it read correctly on the serial number when I did some research on the serial number of the car on the or serial number the VIN number on the dash. The VIN said it was a 350 4 bolt, not the 4 bolt main, but the 4 barrel carburetor. So it was, and when I popped the hood, I saw the 4 barrel carburetor, and I was like, instantly just jumped on it, not even looking at the motor really closely, but it was not a 350. It ended up being a 305 barrel carb. So somebody had pulled the old motor out and stuck that one in there and put the intake back on it, so it didn't really fit the motor. Of course, this is when the dog you seen and the ZR2, the Chevy S10. That's him as a puppy. So this car was in the making, right? It was before I got the S10. I still had the Mustang at this point. I had this car in the back, and I was working on it. You can see I gutted out the interior or somewhat. I was in the process of doing that. And I had a Jigs magazine or a Summit Racing magazine that you can buy all your race car parts, so you know where this story's fixing to go. I started building this car into a race car for drag racing. After getting the bug from of course, these pictures are going to be mixed up. I ain't got the time to put them in order, but in this picture here, this was when my grandpa started helping me out with the car, what he could do, to get it at least running with the stock motor and stock transmission and everything, just to drive it around in the yard. Because when I bought the car, it wouldn't run, and it's a good thing I didn't try to start the car because it had a busted piston. And when we took the motor apart, the piston pretty much crumpled into pieces, and it had that going on, and then another cylinder on the other side. The engine had a lot of scarring, so it had to be bored and honed out. So there's a lot, but this is when I took it over to my dad's, and he really helped me out with the car of getting it ready to go down the track. So we put some brand new wheels and tires, racing drag slicks, not drag radials. This was to go down the racetrack and go down the racetrack only. I was doing a little bit of body work, trying to get. I wanted to paint. This is the car I wanted to paint. I wanted to get this car painted so bad. We had it running good. It ran. This is at the time it ran good. And there, me at the track, or we're at the track down there in Cottonwood, and I got a picture of my mom sitting in the car. She wouldn't never drive it, and I did have that's when I had a racing seat and racing seat belts and roll cage and helmet and everything. You had to have all that, how fast this car was going. Especially the safety. To be safe, you can never do too much. Even if you have the slowest car down there or the slowest car at the track, you can never be too safe. So safety was big time with this car because it was a T-top. And I didn't have no protection over my head other than roll bar right here. So, of course, this was all my dad's metal fabrication. He built me these seat brackets for my seat to put in there. He built the roll bar, and I came in after he did all the welding and everything. And I got in there and started doing the rattle can painting before we put the seat in. So the car was completely gutted other than the dash. But I started trying to paint everything black. And I wanted to put a racing steering wheel on it, but never got around to doing it. So I stuck with I drove that car with a stock steering wheel on that thing. It was a handful. No power steering, but a lot of horsepower. Don't worry, I got some more pictures of the engine and stuff. But this was, again, back. These pictures here are back over at my grandpa's where he was helping me do some wiring on the car, trying to get the stock motor running and stuff. We rebuilt the motor. This was not the race motor. This was a stock 305 that I completely rebuilt the car. He was teaching me, how to do this. And so he would sit in a chair and he would coach me of what I was supposed to be doing. And that's how you learn, is getting your hands and actually getting out there and getting in a shop or something and build the car. Or get something and start working on it and learning. Especially if you got a good teacher. And of course, when it was a stock motor, I did not have no racing parts in this car or nothing. In this motor. But I painted it and made it look like a $20,000 engine is what I made that thing look like. I looked like it. I wanted to, even if it was stock and it didn't, that's when I had just got back from, having it bored out because of the piston that was busted up in it and scarred the cylinder wall. So we only bored it over like 20 thousandths and then got a whole new set of pistons, and that was it. But stock connecting rods and stock crank, stock cam, stock heads, everything like that. Just a basic overhaul of a motor. That's all it had, and some fancy paint. That's all you're looking at. So, of course, that little shed we had, we couldn't get the whole car up in there because we had to have some table room and some room to work. So, half of it would be out. This was dead in the summertime, so it was hot, sweating to death. Of course, on these cars would have a plate right here for your license plate. I took that off, and that's where my kill switch was to turn the car off and on. I could kill the whole car with that one switch because my battery was back here in the back. Relocated it from the front into the back. Of course, I didn't run no alternator on the car. It was a full-on, almost like a radio controlled car almost. I mean, I had to charge the battery up every run or get enough juice in it to make a run. Of course, I did have an alternator on it at this point because we had the stock motor in the car, and that was the whole purpose here. But at the time, I was still putting in the racing parts, I forgot what those were called. They fasten down your trunk lid. Of course, I didn't have no plexiglass. This was all original body, original steel, real glass car. And you'd be amazed of how fast this car was, and I didn't have no fiberglass hood, nothing like that. And I had some cheap headers. I looked for the cheapest headers I could find, and I thought they were long tubes that go down, like the traditional long tube headers from the older muscle cars. But no, they were shorty. Had to do with them shorty headers. Of course, we're getting the motor back in here. See how I cleaned up I didn't paint the engine bay. All this was the factory paint. And I just washed it with a washcloth and some soap. And got it looking that good. A little bit. Of course, this panel right here that looks I riveted. I built that. I built that little panel out of, I forgot what I built that thing out of, but cut it out, the shape. And that's where your heater, air conditioning, all that goes in there. See, this car never was going to have air conditioning again. And at this point, see, it's a stock motor, so I kept the stock fuel pump, water pump. But there's my kill switch right there. There's my S10. And of course, I started collecting all them racing decals and stuff from all the parts I was buying. And the gauges, all the race gauges, racing seat belts, you name it, I had it. And they're my big drag slick. They were small tire, 29.5 by 1050, 15. That was the rear drag slick on the back. And that's the tire size I had. And I did had to make had some body damage right here where I backed into a stinking, can't remember what I backed into. I think I backed into a lawnmower or something, and it messed that. So I got the hammer, a dolly, like one of those plastic hammers, and knocked it back out. And so I didn't have the stuff to do the paint and body stuff, so I painted that whole section black so you couldn't see it. That's why I wanted to get this thing, take it to a professional paint and body shop. It needs some fiberglass work, Bondo right here on the spoiler. But my grandpa started out with me with the car when I first got it, and I was first started working on it with him. And he did everything that he could do with it. And then what I did, and talked to my dad and told him what I had planned for the car and everything. And You know, my stepbrother, he always raced and everything, and he was into drag racing and stuff with in a Dodge. So he would come and help me out with the car. I had a lot of help with the car, getting it together and all, and like the B&M ratchet shift. Of course, at this point, we had a racing transmission in it. It was a turbo 400 transmission, and the motor was a 355 built out to like a 383. It had some really high compression, bracket racing cam, valve train stabilizers on the. It had a valve job done on it, everything. Of course, see, I had a factory seat sitting over there if anybody wanted to ride, except I didn't have the shoulder harnesses over here in this picture, but I did have a lap belt that you could buckle up with a lap belt. Very dangerous, but risking it for the biscuit if you wanted to take a wild ride with me. And this car would pull the front tires off the ground, which it did a series number on my struts because it had the factory struts in it. They didn't last too long. Of course, the 305 at the point was not going to be enough power. So, you know, I was just saying about that 355. It was a bracket racing motor, and we got it used from a guy that was gonna he was had just freshened the motor up, so it was a fresh motor, and the motor was running in a outlaw car, which is a drag car. It's an outlaw drag called the Outlaw 10.5, and he ran a small block with some nitrous, but that was the small block that he ran. But then he took the said I'll build it back, you know, the way it needs to be and everything for bracket racing, but it's not going to have no nitrous for it. Not going to have no nitrous. So it was built for it, but I never ran nitrous on it. I wanted to because I wanted to go faster. Of course, the car was all steel and no fiberglass nowhere, and no plexiglass windows like a full blown race car should have been. But it was fast. It was fast enough for me. But you know, I could have went faster as my skill level progressed. This was not built by anybody that I knew. What this is a fuel tank, and I put the fuel tank in front of the radiator because this is what I would see on some of the other cars because I was going to the racetrack getting ideas and pointing out like, oh, look where he's got his gas tank, and this is a 3-gallon gas tank like a motorcycle. You know, 3 gallons, 3-gallon motorcycle, whatever. But anyway, I got it from Summit Racing Equipment and everything. So they built, my grandpa built the brackets for this thing to be mounted right here. And I was like, where we going to put it? So we had to cut out this frame a little bit, notch it out with a grinder. And then there's the bottom brace of the bottom support for the radiator and the top support. So we just used that right there, and it was easy to get a couple of bolts in there. And of course, the radiator was gone anyhow. So, I mean, the radiator was out of the car before we could put it back in. So, there's another picture of it. Racing fuel cell. Can't remember if these are already seen. You can get these gauges right here at O'Reilly's or AutoZone carries them. It's a 3-gauge cluster. Oil temperature, very important. Water temp and battery. You know, having a battery gauge on there, because I don't run no, or I didn't run at the time. I didn't run no alternator, so I knew I was running nothing but battery. So what I had to do is mainly park close to the staging lanes as you can, because you don't want to do much driving with nothing but a battery, other than going down 1/8 of a mile. Of course, this is when I got the tires mounted on the wheels. My dad bought these wheels and the tires for me. Pretty much everything you're gonna see here on out, this is all my dad's doing. My dad did a lot with the car, going from the racing part of the drag. What I'm trying to say, the drag racing part of the car. See, we had to cut out the frame right there a little bit for the tires to fit. And these were used parts from other guys' cars that they wasn't going to use anymore. So we got these coilover shocks for the rear. And it was a 12-bolt GM with 456 gears in it. And a spool rear end in it. It didn't have the spider gears. It was a spool. So, of course, a spool rear end means it is locked these axles together. There's no those little bitty tiny spider gears that's inside of a differential. Inside this one, didn't have it. Ladder bar suspension. We rigged it up with that. Of course, this was used off of another car, and we having to do a whole lot of fab work to get this to fitting and lined up properly, everything. Of course, the car was on jack stands, so I couldn't really get really good pictures of the whole picture here. I just had to get one side. There's a little bit of framework right there you can see right up here at the very top picture. But we did have this is when I was rigging up my rear brakes, my drums, and I had stock, or the brakes that this rear end had. Whatever brakes was on that the rear end of the car, that's what I stopped with. My factory brakes was pretty much junk. And my stepbrother had some old racing seat belts. Latch link. You see the latch link right here. And he gave them to me to get me started, and get me to where we can race on the track, because he wanted to race me on the track and stuff with his Dodge Dart. I believe I got a picture of that somewhere around here. I don't know if it's in this pile, though. I don't know what's in here. I don't know what's coming up next. But there's another picture of the rear end. There's the 355, and it was putting out maybe 600, 630 horsepower. It had a 950 CFM carburetor. That's the biggest double pump carburetor that you could go with that was modified. You can't even find those. It was a 4150 carburetor, but go in there and put the big jets in it and everything, and I had this air filter looking scoop from my old brown truck, and that's my dad's actually. He ran it on one of his old muscle cars, and that's the original vintage style scoop from the 70s. So I wanted to just stick it on there to get this picture, and that was it. Of course, at the time, look at the fuel. We were doing the fuel for this thing, running fuel lines and everything in this point. So it wasn't going to be too much longer here. Had to put my water temp in there. Had to get the stuff to do that with from AutoZone. But it was coming together. Slowly but surely. It took a while, but it was coming together. There's some more fab work that my dad did on the roll cage, and built a brace that was adjustable right here. You like a T-handle thing right there, and that was a back brace for the seat. And then I had some toggle switches down here for my fan, water pump, fuel pump. Had a ignition switch right here where you flip up the toggle and push button start. For exhaust, I planned on just running racing headers right out the side of the car like an open header system. But some race classes require you to have a muffler of some sort. So, ended up going in the muffler shop in Dothan did the exhaust work here. Those wasn't cherry bombs. I know I like cherry bombs, but they were Dynomax 12-inch racing glass packs. Of course, they were loud because I just had them cut off right there behind them, turned down, so the compression, it would blow all kinds of grass and junk. I should have had that turned a little bit more out this way so it would blow more out the side. But it is what it was. And there it is. That was not a fiberglass hood. That was metal hood, urethane bumper, steel fenders, steel doors, real glass, top, bottom, T-top, and back. So it was a heavy, heavy car. And that motor was doing a lot of work to try to get it moving as fast as it was. And here it is all done and everything. There's a picture of it. Of course, this is a mixed up picture, so that's when it's sitting on that crate when we opened it up. So it had zip tied all the stuff, so no dirt, nothing to get into the valves and everything. And of course, I already had this from some of the older pictures that you saw a while ago from my 305, so it would fit right on there, and that's what I did. I just stuck the air filter on it, made it look like more horsepower, just make it look more than what it was. Of course, it had a lot. Naturally aspirated. I never put nitrous on this car. And there's my grandpa. He came out there to watch me race. Watch me race the car and everything. This is in the winter time, or in the fall. It was in the fall. Because the leaves was turning off the trees and stuff. Of course, pine trees, you ever look at pine trees never shed their leaves or bristles or whatever. And there was a lot of pine trees down there in Cottonwood. Of course, everybody, you see these other cars out here, they had some big money, a lot more high dollar car with plexiglass and everything. And I would take this car and you would be surprised that this thing ran faster than an 8.0. The fastest I got it down to, because of how heavy it was it was in 2010 time trials, foot brake class, car 187, because of course you saw the pictures here. It is a death trap. So it ran a 7:99.68 with a 2:11 reaction time. So my reaction time was getting better at 86 miles an hour. That's due to of course, the weight of the car. This car was heavy. All original doors, hood. Now, if I went with a fiberglass hood, Lexan, the windows, took this big heavy trunk lid off and put a plexiglass one on there, and probably took some more weight out on the inside of the doors that you could cut the inside door out. Every little ounce of weight that you could take off of the car would gain more numbers here. So every bit of weight that I could shave off of the car, the 799 would drop down probably to a 760 and keep on going probably down into the sixes on a naturally aspirated car, or at least a 750. And I would love to see a 750 out of it at 100 and maybe 110 mile an hour if I had all the weight reduction like I needed it to be. And of course, I wanted it to be painted. I wanted it to look good. Of course, I went back red. Well, I think at the time, red was my favorite color at the time. Because I had this car and I had the S10 as well. The Chevy S10. And it was also red. And so that's the story of my race car. I had that in 2010. Actually, 2007 when I got the car, and then 3 years of working on it. And finally, 2010 came along and I raced it. And then I think after this, I sold the car and I got my motorcycle license, and I went and got a Harley Davidson Sportster 1200. Of course, all these motorcycle rallies started going on and stuff, and started hearing about Thunder Beach and poker runs and motorcycle rides and everything, and be like, man, I want to do that now. So to be able to afford a Harley, I had to sell this car exactly for how much the Harley was. And the Harley had that Screaming Eagle exhaust and had the Screaming Eagle intake and everything. And I got pictures of it too, but I don't have enough to make it an actual video. It's just a little odds and ends. I maybe have 2 pictures of good pictures I can take of it, but then it's only going to be like a few seconds long if I made a video. But it's not worth making a video of it because I don't have enough pictures for that one. I never took enough pictures of that. But after that, the S10 got sold or traded. I traded the S10. This is following up with the pictures here. The car got sold for a motorcycle, and the truck got traded for my Silverado, which I have now. So that brings you up to date of all the cars I've had. And I should have had a YouTube channel way back then. If I can get this in here. 1987 Z28 Camaro. But I should have had a YouTube channel a long time ago, but I don't think YouTube was even YouTube when I was doing all this, so. Or I didn't know nothing about YouTube, but this is it for the story time series, y'all. This from here on out, it's just gonna be next upcoming videos of whatever I'm doing. Stay tuned and subscribe if you like the series. See y'all.